Now, this morning there were some very interesting articles in the newspapers about the extraordinary tunnel blocking foam that is going to be used by the Israeli army. It's like a sort of the opposite of Dukalax. You will be blocked. They're going to constipate Hamas. I don't think that's going to be enough. Technology and tanks. This is not sufficient to defeat a 3,000 strong army that has taken refuge under tunnels crisscrossing the area of the Gaza Strip. It's not enough, particularly when the Israeli soldiers like to keep their enemy at a distance. And this is the biggest dilemma facing Netanyahu, facing Israel today. If he sends the troops into Gaza and only half of them return, the Israeli public is not ready for that sort of urban massacre. And that's, I'm afraid, what it will be. And why do we know this? Because there has just been an urban massacre in tunnels. And so, unlike the Ukrainians, unlike the Russians, who will fight to the death, the Israelis are not used to doing that. They're not trained to do that. They're trained to use technology at a distance. And if you go to the Mariupol story, Mariupol was built by the Russians as a military dock, crisscrossed with a city-wide array of tunnels or levels where the Azov Brigade hid with their families in this industrial tunnel system. And the massive bombing siege and the massive blasts that Russia threw at Mariupol simply didn't work. The Russians had built this complex. The Russians knew full well how sturdy it was, how sturdy were the tunnels. And the Hamas tunnels, I'm sure, are as sturdy, and more than that. Unlike the Russians, the Israelis don't really know where all these tunnels are. It's like the people in the roadworks with their strange devices walking around the pavements, going to see where the gas lines are. The Israelis don't know. The Russians built those tunnels, and even the Russians had difficulty attacking the Azov Brigade, who were squirreling away inside these tunnels. And it worked in the end. It worked in the end because the Russians simply blasted and blasted and blasted from the air, and the Russians were successful in defeating the Azov Brigade. The Azov Brigade eventually surrendered, and because, of course, it was all in the full force of the full glare of international publicity, they were taken prisoner, and then they were paraded into a courtyard in their prison and bombed. And the Russians claimed this was a Ukrainian missile, and they dragged in Steven Segal to say, oh yes, it looks very much like a Ukrainian missile. I know all about these things. But Israel doesn't have the stomach for this sort of massacre, and nor would the world have the stomach for this sort of massacre. Israel is designed like Bashar al in Syria, Assad in Syria. Bombs from a distance, targeted killings, drones, tunnel clogging systems. But it won't work with Hamas. And Israel has to consider if this is the right policy and the right approach for the flushing out of Hamas. Maybe, and particularly in the case of Israel, with hostages being pushed from one tunnel to another, one wet tunnel to another wet tunnel, an absolute misery, like orcs, like ants, running from place to place in the dark. And I don't think this this foam constipation is the solution in any way. And on the subject of constipation, this is a subject which I've been dying to squeeze in somewhere. So now is obvious. Putin's Putin. Are you aware of this? Mr. Putin is extremely anxious that his fecal deposits might possibly reveal to a foreign agency something about his health. And indeed, there might then be speculation about whether he's dying. Would that were the case, would that people might speculate. But people will speculate anyway. But they might have evidence if they started inspecting what he left behind. So apparently, he asked his military security and his military scientists to invent a system whereby what he deposited could be retrieved and put in a suitcase. So when Putin travels, you will see the nuclear suitcase, and then you will see this other suitcase, which is Putin's Putin. You want to know what the word Putin means? Well, there you've got it. It's a fecal deposit. So Putin, fecal remains carried in a suitcase to ensure that nobody else can assess Putin's health or predict Putin's end. So what comes out of Putin is for Putin alone. Putin's Putin.